I remember watching Rugrats when I was a kid. They'd imagine they were in an office and they were all grown up. They'd put files away and someone would be typing. And then it had to cut to the reality, and they'd all just be sat in the garden pretending to do all this stuff. Maybe Salad Fingers is just pretending.
So after the latest episode of Salad Fingers, I couldn't help but give the series another do-over. And I also decided to consume a lot of David Firth interviews, reading and listening, and being stuck in that constant loop of Salad Fingers information kind of gave me a new interpretation, or really more a very abstract interpretation of the series. So if you want some sort of clear backstory or some sort of, very specific timeline, that's not what this video is going to be. I'd also like to note that the series is called Overanalyzing for a reason. All interpretations are both valid and invalid. It's up to each person to interpret how they want to see the world of Salad Fingers. David has stated so, we really can't say. Maybe even he doesn't know what's going on. So if that's something you want to listen to for about 20 minutes, here you go. The first episode is simple and effective. It doesn't show much, and for 2004, this was peak internet abstract art. Salad Fingers is a strange guy in a strange world with a strange obsession and strange side characters to go along with him. It's great slow burn horror, nothing actually too terrible happens, but you're just disturbed all the way through. And Salad doesn't seem to acknowledge that anything is wrong. And also, Salad seems to be talking to an audience, like he's talking to us. Now, I'd hold off actually saying that Salad Fingers breaks the fourth wall and that he knows he's in a web series. Sure, he might, but that's really not the point in my interpretation. The point is, he is putting on a show, and he is talking to a disembodied audience. And he does this quite often, at the start of almost every episode, like for instance in the second one. We also get the introduction to the finger puppets, figures that are featured in most of the series. But what these finger puppets represent is that Salad likes to play pretend a lot. He conjures up scenarios with the puppets, and often ignores what's actually happening around him to instead play out his imagined scenario. Notably in this episode where he completely forgets sending a child into the oven, I'd also like to point out that he seems visibly disturbed when he does ask the child to do so, almost like he knows it's a bad thing, yet does it anyway. In the next episode, the object of obsession is a stinging nettle, a thing that a child often dislikes very much, but Salad finds it quite enjoying. He comes upon a baby stroller and he acts as if he doesn't know what it is, naming it simply the nettle carrier, and gently tucks it inside. Right about now is as good a time as any that I'd like to point something out. Salad Fingers is ignorance to his reality. Now I'm sure Salad realizes he's living in a wasteland, and I have reason to believe that wasn't always the case. Or at least it wasn't as bad as it is now, because he often references things that are also true in our world, like the character Horace Horsecollar, and he sings songs that are also real in our reality, suggesting that his world was once much like ours, but is not anymore. And then of course there's Harry, or as he is renamed by our lead, Milford Cubicle. This renaming is another obvious disregard of reality. The name tag is right there, but Salad prefers to conjure up his own reality, his own game, ignoring that important fact that Harry is dead and his name is Harry, and that he's not just popping over for a visit. There's this constant effort to disconnect from the reality of the situation. I think Salad knows that the person/creature's name is Harry. He sees the name tag and that he's dead, but it just feels more safe for him to conjure up a fake scenario in which things go exactly as he wants. But at the start of the fourth episode, a live one interjects. When another creature interrupts and wants to actively interact with Salad, he becomes visibly uncomfortable. Now, to be fair, he's also spoken, so to speak, with another character, but that character didn't impose upon his fantasy at the time, but this one actively comes up close and even licks his hand. It hurts Salad that someone else is breaking his pretend reality. If some other being intersects, he is no longer in full control. He's forced to face the harsh world, and then the being even baits him in with a rusty tap into a bear trap, which both hurts and yet excites him. He seems to be a sadomasochist of sorts. This is also something we've seen in the second episode, where he enjoys impaling his finger on a needle. Now in this scene where he is captured, he isn't even worried. He's actually excited by the rusty bars that hold him. But when the being reappears, he's startled again, and after the being proposes, Salad just states that he doesn't like this game anymore, and just takes himself out of the scene. This for me is important. The idea that once the scenario he is no longer in favors him, he can just put himself out. If his perfect made-up world is disturbed, he can instantly fix it. Just poof, imagine it away. It kind of shows that he is the ultimate force in this universe. But even if he is, there are still things that get to him. Still something that throws him off his game. I've got more proof for this interpretation in the next episode, Picnic, where another humanoid comes along, Salad quickly naming her Mabel. And for most of the picnic, she doesn't speak, Salad even replying as her in conversation.
It's simply delicious, replied Mabel.
But then again, when she actually says something, nothing too harmful or offensive, it's just not part of his play.
I think he likes spoons too. What's wrong? What's wrong?
Again, as soon as there's some sort of external stimuli, Salad instantly crumbles, willing to do anything to go back to his comforting place.
What's wrong, Mr. Finger? Do you not like my mouth words? Naughty man.
So what exactly is going on? I mean, it seems that Salad can imagine and play out any scenario he wants, yet at the same time there are things that break that veil. Something breaks past that play pretend and ruins his stability. Well, in the next episode, a recurring theme might help us figure this out. In the 6th episode, titled Present, one of my favorite scenes, or really 2 scenes, appear. Salad starts talking as if he's in dialogue with someone else, though we don't hear the responses. He looks uncomfortable having this conversation, and as always, once it's done, he flushes the toilet to wash the bad thoughts away, as he always does. But here we see something. We see the fact that in his own mind, he has these thoughts or memories that he considers bad, yet they can't help but come out. So if he's the ultimate force of this reality, are those beings that interrupted him and more figments of his imagination or from his memories, but they're just not good? They don't calm him, they instead disturb him. But when he returns to the house, he sees his own double and begins the other end of the previous dialogue. I will now edit the footage so that the dialogue is actually chronologically appropriate.
Jeremy Fisher, I thought you were out fighting the Great War. Pardon? I'd like a word with you. I'm not one for accusations, but this one's cast iron. I don't understand. I've seen you tailgating my daughter with aspirations of deflowering her rose. No, this isn't true. You've got the wrong bloke, Squire. I don't make mistakes, comrade. This one's textbook.
So this conversation concerns a father and a young man, which stands accused of having relations with the father's daughter. Though the young man pleads innocence, now portrayed by Jeremy Fisher, this likely isn't part of Salad's play pretend. I think it's a repressed memory, but a strong one he can't help but remember sometimes. But it's a strong one he can't help but remember sometimes. But it still comes out in parts, broken, split from character to character, even when recalling real events. Salad can't help but alter it just slightly to help him cope. Jeremy, now a normal-sized doll again, removes a sort of cap from his mouth, spewing green ooze out of it, and then the lovely scene of Salad eating his own double. So what to make of this? As I've said before, Salad's traumatic memories sometimes resurface, coming out as split-up dialogue, or as we see later in the series, even physical manifestations. After all, he can sort of control all of reality. In this episode, Jeremy switches sizes from being a finger puppet to being life-size. This I chalk up to being Salad's imagination, his finger puppet coming to life. We've seen plenty of other delusions, such as him meeting Hubert in the freezer, puppets moving by themselves. I would argue that what we see isn't always what is truly happening. Maybe it's not even never happening. It's what Salad imagines is happening. Now for the self-cannibalism, or rather of Jeremy, as Salad also eats the puppet earlier in the episode, forgetting about it the next moment.
Where have you gotten to?
I think this is another twisted memory. This is also the first time a great war is referenced, Jeremy supposedly being a participating soldier. Now, one might rightfully assume this means World War I, as it was called the Great War before the second one came along. And Salad also often references things from that time period and often speaks in old-timey English dialect. Now, I won't start the usual this is a post-apocalypse theory now. Sure, I mean, it could be the case. But I want you to think outside the box. I want you to think of the war as more of an aspect than a canonical event. Salad Fingers has a child's mind, and he sees lots of things childishly, including the war, as we see in the next episode, Shore Leave. But he has also seen the bad ramifications of it. Death, men coming home traumatized, angry and aggressive, sexual abuse, people living in poverty, perhaps even resorting to cannibalism. All those horrible things stuck in his mind, but again, Salad twists them just a little bit to make them more reasonable to him. War in this series represents the worst of humanity. Events and places Salad doesn't truly understand, but he has felt the ramifications of. So despite his efforts to remain in his comfortable, happy place, those horrors can't help but seep through, catching him off guard. This might also explain why he's sort of sadomasochistic. He's seen so much violent and cruel things that he can't help but equate it with love or care. That's why when he conjures up a being that actually loves him and wants to treat him well, not too well, I mean, he sets a bear trap for him, it disturbs him. That is such an outward concept that he's afraid of it. So back to the episode Shore Leave, I think it's another show of memories. Yet this time, they're more complicated. He mistakes the corpse for his brother Kenneth back from the war. Now, did this brother really exist? I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Kenneth is presented as handsome, but also a bit of a womanizer. Salad says Kenneth's come back to spread his wild oats, a term referring to how a man might carelessly sleep with multiple women, getting them all pregnant. And Salad even plays a part as one of the maidens, so to speak.
Maybe you can come and tuck me in tonight, sailor. Stop that.
This shows that Salad, despite most likely suffering abuse from his male elders, still can't help but see the appeal of a stereotypically macho man, soldiers being regarded as heroes, getting all the girls. Those memories are something that he can sort of build an interesting story on, and those sort of ideals are probably what he was raised on. In my interpretation, Salad's mind is a very conflicted one constantly mixing up imaginary playful scenarios and horrific true memories. That's why he can sometimes enjoy things that we find really disturbing. But then what about the world? Surely some kind of war must have caused this land to turn as desolate as we see it. Again, I tried seeing it from a different angle. The world Salad lives in is both barren, yet strangely full and flexible. New locations pop in and out of existence. Side characters act a certain way one episode and different in the next. As mentioned before, Salad can just take himself out of a scene. I think this is how Salad himself sees the world. He knows it's a cruel and unforgiving place, but despite that, he ignores it. His mind conjures up the aspects of his trauma as an unhospitable wasteland, his own mind wanting to show him that the situation is dire. But oh, Salad is just one rusty object away from fading into gleeful ignorance again. At least until another memory creeps through again. He just refuses to face any of it, so he goes from playing to remembering and so on and so forth.
Hello there, young child. I can't thank you enough. You've picked a rather late hour to be visiting me. Peas pudding hot, peas pudding cold, peas pudding in the pot. Would you care for a spot of ruby tea?
The episodes that follow add further evidence of family trauma, abuse from parents and siblings, pregnancy, birth, abortion, child abandonment, pedophilia, cannibalism, self-cannibalism, lots of that particular, and other things, all happening in war times. Salad Fingers has experienced the lowest of humanity, and he realizes this, and to him it feels like there's nothing he can do but think about something else. The truth is not worth facing, even if you see it. But ever since episode 10, David has put much more intricate story bits and visuals into the series, and those episodes could also hold a separate message all on their own, which I might cover at some point, like I did with the currently latest episode, Crows. So with all that being said, what is Salad Fingers really about? I think it's about how we often look for fun in a world that isn't. That instead of me facing my own fears and problems, I'm overthinking a web series about a guy fantasizing about a rusty spoon. It's about how we look at horror and we can't help but see something beautiful behind it.